My heart can't take it. Thank you all. So anyhow, we have a couple things on the plate today.
So does somebody have their
Somebody has
volume?
their-
Okay, how about now?
Can you hear us now, person? Thumbs up.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. And Ally, did you put the microphone?
I was just trying to reach it.
Very nice.
Wow, I didn't move this over. Okay.
What can I say about technical stuff? You can't do it.
So they're getting ready to do their additional financing. The new mortgage amount is 4 million. So they're over on their mortgage tax exemption. The total project costs have increased to 7,933,500. That's an increase over the November 2nd approval, which was $6,458,150. I confirmed with them that the sales tax was fine, not needing to be increased at this time. So they are seeking your approval for an increase in the mortgage tax exemption to 84,000. They just rounded up to about $19,000, 18 and change over on the other side from our authorization previous. So we need an additional $4 million, but if we follow up all of our previous approvals, we're short, so we can't do the full amount.
So you're recommending what?
What they're requesting from you is an increase in your mortgage recording tax exemption up to 84,000. You previously approved up to 65,000.
Moved by Nick, do I have a second? Gary, you have, there's a typo here.
I saw it now, not. Yeah, thanks. I was like, wait, what's it?
Do I have a second? I'll second it. Second by Tim. Any further discussion? All in favor? I'm sorry. Roll call, please.
Mary King? Yes. Jenny Sullivan?
Thanks.
Mike Wild?
Yes.
Juan Gonzalez?
Yes.
Tim Robinson?
Yeah.
Brian Campbell?
Yes.
Nick Caimano?
Yes.
Dan Bruno?
Yes.
Craig Leggett?
Yes.
Dave O'Brien?
Yes. The next order of business, it's something I'm picking off the table because we're learning different things. We're going to talk about the new solar guidelines. And long story short, and we'll talk about this more later, is that we have been working with an appraiser to help understand some of this information on solar, on solars and the calculations. So we are looking to use them. So we'd like permission to hire this appraiser. Helps understand solar on an overall basis and specific things that come up. At a cost of a retainer about 2,500 to 3,500. I think that was right, Chuck. Correct. And 3,500. Chuck can explain the conversation you had with him, which has really helped us understand a few things.
So we've found a firm out near Buffalo called Imager, Newton, Pigeon, and Magar, or short EMPM.100.com if you want to see what they're all about. And they specialize in dealing with solar projects. As we deal with the IDA solar application, we feel as if it would be smart to get some experts involved. So we are in the process of securing a service agreement from them and then having them help us with the CVE application, assuming the board approves the amended application.
Well, I think we'll extend that because I think it's gonna help us educate more on the process, on the solar ins and outs.
Yes, this won't be just for CVE.
Okay,
That's
that's
correct.
what I was gonna ask. It's
Correct.
gonna be a continuous thing.
Yes, and what we're learning is every solar project is different. Some they own the land, some they're leasing the land. That's one example. So this firm will help us understand the nuances.
But there's a lot of other differences too between different types of projects as we're learning. Dan Bruno?
Yeah, why don't you email us that information on that firm?
Sure.
So I need a motion to approve hiring that.
Is that 25 to 35 per project per year?
It's what they suggested as their consulting for this project up to 3,500. If we want to get into appraisal, there'll be a different fee. So right now, we're just starting with the consulting side.
So this one is just one.
Correct.
Is it Nick? Do I have a second? Dan Bruno? Discussion? And what do we get for this? Well, if we help Chuck and paraphrase more.
Really experienced. They've been dealing with solar projects throughout the state and IDAs and the IDA approval processes. So as we deal with the nuances of the CVE application, we believe they'll bring some value for guiding us through the details.
And you have gone over a couple of them with you when you're satisfied, they know what the hell they're doing.
Dave and I have both had interaction with the firm, spoke with them most recently on Thursday. And it was very helpful just talking about our CVE situation and having some insight that will help us.
And more so it was recommended by individual in real property services who've worked with them and had gone to sessions with them. So I mean, well known in the field. They work with NYSERDA, they work with the state too, so. But
Will this take it through to completion? Will this price get us everything we need for this one application all the way to the finish line?
good question.
It's a good question. It's hard to say. If we accept the amended application, they'll work us through the cost benefit analysis and we could be done. But if we get into some dialogue with the town, with the school wanting to modify our work, then we might need a little bit more time. So it's to be seen.
What's appraisal gonna cost in the future?
They quoted $5,000 for a 5 megawatt project.
You know, and there, but generally this cost would be, in most cases, would be charged to the company who's a solar project. Who's probably doing the
I
evaluation.
truly believe this will be value added, given this is our first solar project,
They're hiring knowledge.
hollering knowledge and experience.
This is our first big project, isn't it?
And we will probably have additional applications in the solar world. So we're developing a relationship as we deal with the nuances and other applications. This firm hopefully will be able to help us out.
Okay,
So you and Chuck are gonna converse with these people, gonna meet with them?
and we'll probably have them make presentations to the board.
Okay, I'd say, if just that, and you pass along information to us.
No, I think that there's, I think, yes, we'll pass along information, but more importantly, I think that in some cases, we want them to address the board to help educate the board. There may be questions you come up with that we don't.
Absolutely.
I mean, we've come with some very complex theories in terms of solar, especially in potential, that'll come up later, especially in potential handling of investment tax credits, which neither one of us understood until we started dealing with it, and we'll address that later in the night.
Thank you.
Ryan?
So there will be an escrow account paid for by whichever company we're talking with, and they will pay for that consulting fee. That's normally how they work.
Well, I know about escrow, but whatever fees we charge, we pass on like we pass on.
That's how it works in our town.
Yeah.
So I mean, it should be an escrow account that CVE would fund whatever consultants or lawyers we have to hire.
The idea is collects a security deposit, so some same difference, and that's for all the expenses that are associated with the project.
Okay. Any other questions? All in favor?
Well, I think
We don't have what. I don't have anyone first or second.
Nick made a motion and Dan seconded.
No?
No, this over. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay, now we have received an amended application from the CDE Solar. I think that what our process has always been when we get an increased application is we run through the entire process again. We start at the calculation of the new cost benefit analysis. We then go into having a public hearing, and then from there we make our decision how the board wants to proceed. So having said that, I think that hopefully Chuck can run through the numbers on what has come across and the changes in the application that we've seen.
Sure. So looking at the application, Vine's application, the total project cost has gone up about $3 million, and we do have a representative from the company with us online, so he will speak to it later also. But in the amended application, the infrastructure work went from $3 million to $3.5 million. The non-manufacturing equipment estimate went from $6.75 million to $8.75 million. Soft costs went from 1.5 to 1.75, and the other costs went from 2.5 to 2.75. That totals up to an increase of about $3 million. Furthermore, CBE made some other, what I'll call minor adjustments with the mortgage reporting tax exemption benefit request and the sales tax exemption request. CBE also sent an addendum along with the application that further clarified several issues on site conditions and the location, the various tax revenue statuses. They had a very interesting table that showed our initial tax revenue scenario in our original IDA pilot versus the tax revenue scenario per the New York State Department of Taxation and Finance model, which is currently being contested in the courts, but nevertheless, very interesting information. What I took from it was that our last approval was very similar to the amount that was calculated from this New York State Taxation and Finance model. Furthermore, CBE went on to talk and clarify the environmental benefits. There were some questions in our last application about the environmental benefits stated, so CBE has clarified that. And then CBE went on to talk about community solar benefits, the NYSERDA grant, and federal incentive tax credits, all additional information that will be included in the processing of the cost benefit analysis, assuming we accept the application.
So for anyone who, all the board members got copies of this, but for anyone interested wants to look to read this, it will be posted on our website, so you can download and look at it, read it, and enjoy it. I thought it was very detailed. I thought it provided a lot of good information, and certainly we're learning something about investment tax credits. And I will give you the thumb scale, and that's why we're getting other people involved. Investment tax credits allow us up to 30% of the total investment to use investment tax credits. If you look at some solar companies, they don't have in order to take investment tax credits, you have to have a tax liability. Most of these companies will not have it. Small companies like Community Solar will not have the ability to take advantage of the investment tax credits. So apparently there's two uses to this. And the first use is number one, if they do have the abstract tax liability, they can take that. So which means it would be a public benefit directly to them. In another case is that the investment tax credit can be sold off to an equity partner. An equity partner will then reinvest into the company and in exchange for tax credit. So there is an indirect benefit. However, the investment in the company has to be paid back at the end of 5 years. So I'm just going over what I understand. That's why we need the consultant involved, because I don't understand this, because that would affect our treatment of what we do things. So, in that case, it's not a direct benefit, because I said, so what you're telling me is, so I said to I think it was Carson or someone else, no, one of the accountants, I said, it sounds to me like a creative way to do a loan to the company. And he said, yeah, that's really what it is. So it's more than that, but that's paraphrasing, but I want people to understand that before we make any decisions or any comments on what's going on.
No problem with legality with that.
Federal government's the one that set this up, so.
It's a very common program at the federal level. It's really a way for solar companies to finance their projects. They'll have direct investment, they'll borrow, and then they'll use these tax credits to get additional equity.
And generally, the companies that buy this, it's not companies, it'll be large banks that have a huge tax liability, who will take these investment tax credits and in fact, in my words, in my simple understanding, loan money to the company so they can build a project and repay it after 5 years. So again, we need more, understand more about it. Terry.
Can I just make a comment?
Yes.
I know Mr. Barton just talked about the solar model that the Department of Taxation and Finance has developed. And the New York City Assessors Association is opposed to that. Okay. It far decreases the value of it produces a number that far underestimates the value of these solar projects. When using the model, we have 5 or 6 now in line putting besides CBE, and they're the only ones that came to the ODA. I just thought another company we're dealing with just sent me the solar model project or the solar model using for their project, and it came out to be about $2.1 million. When I run the numbers and look at the numbers and the cost and the expenses that they quote, it came in about $5.9 million. So there is a huge difference between what the solar model is showing and what assessors believe the full market value is for these projects.
Agreed, and I think the courts are working through that issue. And just for the record, for our cost benefit analysis, we use the higher number that you're referring to. So we did not use the taxation department's number.
Right, but you had mentioned
Right.
that
In-
was something that CBE
In
had
the
wanted to
CE,
do.
correct, yeah.
Wanted to do.
Yep.
And can I ask a question? Are you dealing with John Zakowski?
His firm.
Yes.
His firm.
He's very knowledgeable.
Very knowledgeable.
Very knowledgeable, and I would definitely suggest you get those professional opinions.
We appreciate your endorsement. Thank you. It's good
But,
firm.
I think you have to think long and hard about, trying to pinpoint a number without any assessors, input.
It'd be nice if the court case was settled.
Well, you know,
But Terry's probably saying a minute. That doesn't mean assessors have to use that.
well, if Department of Taxation and Finance had their way, that was the problem. They were, the assessors were gonna have to, were mandated to use that number. And the formula they were using,
Mhm.
that NYSERDA helped them come up with,
That's the thing.
which means less value, less tax money.
I'm not saying we're agree with it because I don't understand the full complexity of it. But I do know they deal a lot with depreciation for discounted cash value in the project. Because the life of the equipment has a shelf life and they depreciate over a series of years.
Decommissioned and everything else.
So thank you for that. I'm not endorsing or saying anything about that model, so. Good. I can't get it. So anyhow,
Just for a point of information, if you don't mind, for all who don't know Terry, that's Terry Ross. She's the assessor for the town of Queensbury. You're welcome, Terry. Thank you. Sure.
so learned a lot and we're looking at things. So any questions on the CBE application at this point? And we're still at the point we're just deciding whether or not to accept the application before we go through the rest of the process.
I do have a question. 50% of the goods we purchased are to be purchased in the county. And
That's what they say, yes.
yeah, and I didn't see an addendum. There was supposed to be an addendum to that?
Yes, there was a separate document that was sent out, dated January 26th. That says addendum to CV North America amended application. It was sent out with the application on Thursday or
Oh.
Friday.
Well, isn't there supposed to be a list of vendors?
Not required. We can hear from the representative CBE if that would be helpful.
I think it's premature where they're gonna get all the materials from, most of the vendors.
I didn't know there were any solar manufacturers in one county.
I know.
Oh, but there's parts they could source from electrical firms, cable, stuff like that.
All right, and so ask the question, at what point do we see that? List
I
of,
defer to council because
I mean, you can certainly ask for that information upfront as part of the application process prior to the public hearing, so that can be information that you can request prior to that.
that would be helpful.
what, oh,
Craig beat me by a millisecond.
364,000 assessed value, is that what's on the tax map this time, or is
that's
that?
currently what's on the tax map.
That was for vacant land classification,
That was the vacant land classification.
and the understanding is that if it gets changed to a solar use, the land value classification, the land classification change.
I'm not sure it says solar, it's based on usage of land. What,
In your original approval, the resolution indicates that the base value will be determined at the time the code goes into effect, because we knew that there would be a modification of that classification. So we wanted to wait until that time frame, so we knew what that would be.
in some of our projections, we use $750,000 because that's about what they're paying for land. I don't know what the Terry's gonna come in at it, but a fair guess is gonna be a lot more. And then Terry's got other things to take consideration, like if they take all the lump trees off, how does that affect the value of land? And, you know, there's a whole slew of things that are gonna affect her justification about where she values it at. But we did take that into consideration. We did annotate that in the original resolution. That's your question, right? Probably more than what it
Is
is.
this still Forest Enterprise land, or has this been?
Forest Enterprises, they say, should they get IDA assistance, they will close on land in March. I will let Carson say this, he said this several times. And, Carson,
Yep.
I'm gonna put you on the spot. You tell me what's gonna happen if you don't get IDA assistance.
Yeah. So there's risk if we don't get an IDA pilot with the property tax. It's a big unknown right now. And we need that secured payment per year for our financing. Because it has a big impact on, net income. And we're not sure how the local assessor will assess the project. It's a big question mark. It makes it very difficult for us to close with our financier. And that's why we're seeking a pilot, so we have stable property tax payments.
And what, in fact, you told me at one time, the project probably would not take place if they don't get IDA assistance. Is that what you told me?
Yes.
Okay.
Just a comment, because I've heard person speaking for. Like I said, we have 5 other projects coming, solar projects coming all the same size. And not one of them has gone to the IDA. And the one that I spoke with last, said they don't need the IDA financing. So just putting that out there.
Carrie, can you tell us, I have a question for you.
I'm sorry.
Can you tell us if, in regards to that, that there is a, I lost my train of thought.
Well, I can tell you that the town of Kingsbury is requiring a pilot for those, even though they're not going through IDA. And we have not opted out of the exemption. Okay, so we're gonna allow the exemption, but we're gonna require 50% of the taxes be paid each year for the town. The county, I believe, has a memo out. Let's speak to that. how much but they're gonna require a pilot too. From the school, obviously, if it's Queensbury School District, you get full.
So I remember the question. Do any of those other solar projects have a benefit to low income people? That's this one does.
I don't know if any of them do. But
That was part of
I hadn't heard that this was just for low income people anyway.
it. It isn't, but there is a portion of the benefit, you know, the solar that discounts lower income, moderate income people like 10%. Carson, can you explain that a little bit?
Yep, that's correct. So a portion of the subscribers will be low income.
So there is an economic benefit to some of the residents for this particular project, in my opinion.
Yeah, you're referring on the addendum that we were talking about earlier. There's a sentence in there here. It says in total, the 800 subscribers will reduce their energy cost by about $3.7 million over 25 years, assuming energy rate at 13 cents per kilowatt today, escalating at 2% per year. I think that's what you're referring to. And Terry, if I could ask you, of those 5 projects in Queensbury, 2 of them are on county land, correct?
Only one's on county land, I know, that the airport one.
I thought there were 2 here.
It's 2 sites on.
2 sites in
Two
one
sites.
company.
Yeah,
Same contract.
yeah. And again, what we're learning is every project is different.
But they're all 5 megawatts. All 5 megawatts. Yes, and in most cases, they're leasing the land.
Right.
They're not buying the land.
Thank you.
Hold on, I got,
I'll take Mr. Wildwood first.
Yeah, go ahead, I'm just taking
You waited
notes.
a long time.
I'm ready, go ahead, I won't forget, I'm good.
No, it's something that Terry said. If they're gonna have pilots, I heard you say that they're gonna pay 50% of the tax.
Right.
The pilots. I don't understand.
That's-
What tax?
Sorry, Karen, could you go to the microphone just in case people
Well, you can't-
are on Zoom?
Okay.
Well, guys, don't mind, I think that might work.
Yeah, Liz.
Sure, with the solar exemption, that the state is kind of promoting, they are, each taxing jurisdiction can require a pilot. Doesn't have anything to do with the IDA. IDAs do pilots too, but these are payments in lieu of taxes. And we can require them, the taxing jurisdictions can require them. So in CVE's this case, they're paying, it's not based on what they would pay in taxes, it's based on a small amount. The town board decided that we would require for any of the rest of these solar projects, that they would pay 50% of the town tax based on the assessed value. So they're getting a 50% exemption because these solar projects would be wholly exempt.
Who's giving them the pilot?
The town is making them pay 50%. That's the pilot for the town. The county is going to require a pilot too. So they're going to offer the exemption, but they're also going to require some percentage of those taxes. And the school, of course, will get all of them, all of the taxes, because they opted out, Queensbury School opted out of the exemption.
I think Mike Wild was way ahead of you. You put it in first. Second time.
Thank you, gentlemen, Mr. Chairman. There's a couple of things that have troubled me with this. For one, first off, was a conversation, Mr. Chairman, you and I had about one of the reasons for this discussion is because the original application didn't include $1.2 million or 1 point something million dollars from a NYSERDA grant. And I'm kind of surprised that that would be something that you would just kind of forget about. Again, that's what kind of started me thinking a little bit more about what's happening here. So I've looked through all the applications and data that was sent, and I believe it was either you or Ali sent us an attachment that was an Excel spreadsheet, and that was called a DTF Final Model Quaker Corrected. And in that talks about all sorts of credits and calculations related to what what kind of revenue they're gonna get, what their expenses are, what some of the kind of benefits they get throughout. And Terry, I apologize, this might be something you were talking about earlier, but the numbers don't add up, right? Because if I take this spreadsheet and go all the way across their income or revenue, it comes out to 8 million, where the application says 37 million. So I'm just trying to make things make sense. And
Where'd you get
They're not-
37 million? I don't,
Pardon me?
where'd you get 37 million? I don't recognize.
and the application. And
The
bear with me, I don't have it printed out, but there's an application amended. And on number 7, financial metrics, their total revenue is 37 million.
That's over the course of 25 years.
Again, that's why I was doing the same thing across this financial model. In this Excel spreadsheet, I just added up all the revenue they're getting over 25 years. It didn't
Yeah.
come to 37 million.
Carson, what's?
Yeah, the DTF spreadsheet is the model from the Department of Taxation and Finance. And that's using a discounted cash flow methodology to give you an assessed value today. And what they're doing is taking net income over each year, over 25 years, and discounting that income the further out you go to represent it in today's dollars. So it's only the income, it's not the top line revenue. And then on top of that, the further out you go, the less that income is worth. So it adds up to about $3.2 million for an assessed value for this project today.
That's why they use the term discounted cash value.
I'm not an accountant.
I'm,
I'm not an accountant by any means. I just look at what I think the number should be, and I'm confused. And because of the fact that a significant portion of their income revenue, however you want to state it, the grant coming from NYSERDA wasn't disclosed, has kind of raised my intent.
On the app,
Is missing. Carson, give me just a moment, if you don't mind. I do know a little bit about something called PPAs. They're power purchase agreements that electrical generators, people that generate electricity, use to hook to the grid. And they're typically a long-term kind of like a pilot or the like, where you know how many cents or dollars per kilowatt or megawatt you're going to get over the time period, because there's an agreement to purchase this power. It's called a power purchase agreement. And Carson, do you have a power purchase agreement with National Grid? And is it listed here somewhere in terms of what kind of revenue you're getting from National Grid based on that power purchase agreement?
yeah, so there's something in New York State called the VEDR rate. It stands for Value of Distributed Energy Resources. And that's the rate that we get compensated for our electricity. And we
And just bear with me for a second, Carson. Is
Yeah.
that your power purchase rate? Is that what the utility is providing you? Or is there
yes,
some kind
it's
of- that's your total revenue.
yes, that's our total revenue. That's not a power purchase agreement in the traditional sense. It's not called a power purchase agreement. We receive these VEDR credits. We register with National Grid. We generate our electricity, send it back into the grid, and then they compensate us at the VEDR rate. And that rate in New York State was determined, there's a methodology to get to this rate. It was determined, 6 years ago. The value of distributed energy resources, about 50% of it is fixed. And the other 50% floats with wholesale energy prices. It more or less comes out to what you would pay at your home, a retail rate. But more or less about 13 cents for this project. So it's not fixed. It is for a term of 25 years though. And it will rise and fall with energy prices.
So, Carson, just for clarity, it says that the DRV rate, that's the rate we're talking about, right? 21,
Yes.
21 cents per kilowatt hour. I believe that's more than I pay for it.
Yeah,
As a customer. So you're also
There's-
getting additional benefits of 13 cents a kilowatt from the state?
No, we're getting all in 13 cents a kilowatt hour from the state. There's, what makes up the 13 cents per kilowatt hour is the energy rate, the capacity rate, the demand reduction value, which is also known as the DRV, and then the RECs, the SRECs, the environmental RECs, renewable energy credits. The DRV rate and the REC are fixed. Energy and capacity sit on top of that, and they float with the wholesale energy and capacity markets. And you sum them all up today for this project in this portion of National Grid, it's about 13 cents a kilowatt hour. So you take up,
That'll be figured out.
Me too.
I'm just thinking I think there's a lot of questions that are going to be answered before we move forward with this application. And I'm not sure if it invalidates the prior application. Yeah.
Well, the request for an increase in the project value, total project cost, requires us to revisit the application,
The whole application.
the full application.
Okay.
Correct.
Thank you. I probably have any more questions, but we'll wait for the consultant to jump on board and help us out.
So what we need to do to move forward is to accept the application so we can go through the rest of the process. Our determination will probably be different when we get this education, but we need the application accepted so we can either move forward and find out all these answers.
Just one more. Does that mean they have to go through send letters to the town?
Yeah.
The county?
Yeah.
And the school district?
Yeah.
All right, so this is like starting afresh,
Yeah.
right?
Like wiping the project clean and starting again.
Thank you. I'll make that motion to accept this application.
Motion by Mike, do I have a second? Dan? And next,
I just a comment.
Microphone?
You
No, I can't hear you.
don't-
They can't hear you.
What?
Oh, right.
I can't hear you. Keep going.
Brian, you can't hear anything.
You can't, you're too loud, you can't hear anything. I sat in this room for 8 years during the time that Warren and Washington County beat their heads on the wall for the burn plant. We had, it just got too convoluted, which is what this is getting at. We can't do this. How are we gonna do it? We need this consultant, the committee. We need somebody to help us who's on the, I know you guys do a great job, but that's not the only thing we have to do. We can't do that alone.
We agree.
We agree. And I know that Terry's probably listened to John Sikowski talking. And she endorsed his firm. Well, she endorsed John. I don't know if she endorsed the whole firm, but
He's
you know,
very knowledgeable.
he's good. Let's find out the two facts.
Yeah.
Let's find out how perception is. We know what we think, we know what Carson thinks, but somewhere in the middle, there is a lot of information we're lacking.
And it's gonna continue.
Yeah. So anyhow.
Dave,
Campbell.
so to finish the discussion, and this is probably gonna go into the next part of your discussion, but on that sheet, it shows the income and the expenses of the first year over $600,000. So if that is the case, I have no reason to believe why we should use any exemption for sales tax and mortgage tax on something that doesn't provide any jobs going forward. I just think that's totally off the table.
Well, I think
And I
we need,
think for both counties and for the towns in those counties, that's a huge cost. And we can go through and look at their application, but for every person that doesn't come, there's 10 more that are interested in coming. So that's fine by me. So that's where I'm at. Yep.
all in favor of the motion.
Aye.
Carried. So within that motion should have been the ability to let me set the public hearing. We were ready for this public hearing.
Yeah, tomorrow morning, got it.
No, it's gonna take a while. It's gonna take a while.
I'll modify that motion.
Okay, thank you. Modify the motion to the second degree of the modification. Okay. It won't be in the next, probably till the end of the week, till we come to any point where we can continue the discussion and potentially set a public hearing.
Okay.
Okay, fair enough?
Fair enough.
Okay, moving on. What?
I know,
Moving on, we received a missive from, there's public comments from, Travis. And I've asked the attorney to look through those comments to determine what is accurate or what is inaccurate or what's misunderstood. And so I'd like to address that.
I went through the comments that were received and have some responses to some of the comments that were made. The first one is a discussion about solar policy that was adopted in June of 2018. That policy was repealed in December 2021. That was following the amendments to GML that allowed for renewable energy products. The comments goes down to speak to the location of the property and whether or not this is essentially whether or not it's the best use for this property, this type of project. The comments indicate that this analysis is critical and a mandatory element. We tend to disagree with that comment. We're not the owner of this underlying property, or if this was a parcel in one of our parks, then we could undertake that analysis. But typically, historically, you have not reviewed a parcel to determine whether or not a particular project is best suited for this property, or vice versa, that property is best suited for this particular lot. In addition, a solar project is in line with the statutory allotment to do renewable energy projects. And this project in particular was approved by the planning board for the town on this particular lot. So I know that in Carson's amendment to the application, he's also indicated some information that he has, in his opinion, why this is a suitable lot for a solar project. The next comments address the public funding and the lack of that information being provided in the application. So that, as we just discussed, the application has been amended and has been resubmitted with all those additional public funding sources disclosed as part of the application. The next series of comments discuss the analysis that we undertook with respect to the pilot calculation. This is the same analysis that we typically review from any project standpoint. So we use the existing tax rate then in effect at the time that we do that calculation. I'm not sure if there was an overlap because of the new tax year or something that may have been an issue, but the process that was followed with respect to this project was the same analysis that we went through. I believe that part of this is in reference to the total project cost and why that number wasn't used for the pilot calculations. I'm maybe misunderstanding the comment, but typically we wouldn't take the total project cost to base the evaluation of the pilot on, because not all of the total project costs are accessible improvements. There's in certain cases there's soft costs like engineering fees, equipment purchases that aren't necessarily accessible portions of the project.
If I can address that, having looked at the thing, there are costs such as engineering costs, there are costs such as financing costs, there's costs such as bonds or other financing. There's other costs in there that are completely not accessible because they're not hardcore. I mean, Terry would never use the soft costs like that in her calculation, would you, Terry?
They're not real property.
Not real property. So when you look at the real property, we're still looking at that. It isn't even half the in terms of, so that's just an opinion from just playing with numbers. That's not the final opinion because we haven't got that in there. Well, so that number is wrong. We don't use the total project cost on any project to determine what the value is. And secondarily, I think, Sarah covered that, is that we use the tax rate when we calculate. When we did it was December 12th, I think the tax rate in Queensbury was like 52 cents.
Now
It went up to 82. And now that we're in a different tax year, we have their number because we can't forecast a number, we use that number. But just as we do pilots every single year, we use the actual tax rate at the time of billing. So I just want to clarify that. That number is not frozen in stone. It's based on what the town's tax rate is or the municipality's tax rate at the time. Thank you. Just wanted to make that clear.
So the next group of figures, this is actually the complete, or not the complete, it's a portion of General Municipal Law 859-A. So that speaks for itself. That is the statutory language. That discusses about a statement made that's either knowingly false or knowingly misleading. Did this it may be able to lead to the termination of financial assistance. Just so everyone is clear, there's been no financial assistance granted or given at this time. We've approved the project, but there hasn't been any sort of, they haven't taken advantage of any of those benefits yet. The next figure or the next comment is with respect to the forest. And CB has responded to that comment in its amended application. And likewise for the comment about the cars, that's also been addressed in the amended application. And I guess one of the points was is with respect to these statistical information, only you as a board know whether or not you took that into consideration with respect to it, or whether or not you believe that that was knowingly false information that was provided to you. The last comment is with respect to where solar projects are primarily manufactured. To the extent that comment is accurate, the idea is consistently encourage that projects locally source materials. And to your comment earlier, we can ask Travis, or we can ask Carson to expand on that comment with respect to where the 50% is coming from. The 50% is coming from some other, or what products are being purchased. That's within your discretion to request that information. So I'm happy to answer any questions if you had other questions regarding the comments that were received, but that.
In general,
Our response.
in general. Are we on the right road? Are we doing something bigly wrong?
Well, I think we took into consideration the fact that some of the information was not included in the application, and and we're moving forward under that.
Then he has amended his application to include that information. So I think, not to open another can of words, with the consultant that Chuck talked to today, could you say what the consultant said about these additional grants and stuff?
So the representative from the firm we were talking about, John Zukowski's firm, said there is a question about, are you talking about some of the grants and the federal tax incentives?
Yes.
And there is question whether or not they should be included in the cost benefit analysis. So we need to frankly explore more with this outside expert. So it's a fluid situation, and we're going to get into the details and present what we think will be a meaningful analysis for the board's consideration.
So Carson, will you tell us how you treat that NYSERDA grant? It was interesting because Brian brought it up, or Brian or Mike, you're together, brought up what consists of that in this year's
Yeah.
revenue.
Yeah, so it's considered revenue. It's not a source of financing. And that's why I was left off the initial application, because that section was for financing sources.
And how it's paid, from what you told us, is that half of it's paid at the beginning of operation, is that?
Yeah, it's a source of revenue because it's paid only when we've fully constructed the site and it's operating.
So in the first year, that would give the delta the revenue of approximately $600,000.
Yep, it's paid 50% at COD, commercial operation date, and then 25% at the end of year one and another 25% at the end of year two.
Yes, Brian.
Well, that's perfect then, because they have the money that they would be withholding from sales and mortgage tax if we gave it to them, so they're in great shape. Right out the door. So you included that all on the revenue side because it wasn't financing, is what you're saying?
Yeah, it's revenue.
But
It's not
fine. Revenue calculation you have or not?
What's that?
But if it's not financing and it is revenue, is that included in your revenue calculation because that was the determination you made? Or
I
is it not included at all?
It's included in the overall returns of the project. So that's in the 37 million in top line revenue that
But
the
is it
project.
included in our application on the revenue side?
I'm not sure there's a line for revenue.
There is
On
no
the
line of
application.
revenue. That was supplementary what he's getting. So Brian's question was, when you did your pro forma for year one, did you include that $600,000 from NYSERDA in the pro forma for your first year of operation?
I'd have to go back and check that initial application on that specific ask.
Not the application, it's your pro forma.
Which pro forma? I'm sorry.
Whatever your internal calculation was for the first year of revenue.
Yes, yeah, just for our financial model that the bank and the tax equity partner look at. Yes, the NYSERDA money, NYSERDA grant is revenue in addition to energy sales in years 0, 1, and 2. It's not being used to pay for construction or labor.
What's it being used for
The income.
I think as we get into this conversation, it illustrates why we need a consultant.
then? Yeah, amen.
We need to understand that.
If it were paid now before we started construction, it would be a source of financing because we could use it to pay for construction, but it's being given to us after construction.
Okay. Where do we stand? We accept the application, we vote on it?
Yep.
Okay, we vote on it. Okay, good. Okay.
Like
So-
I said, it's too convoluted.
Anyhow, you're right. We need to get organized on it. So, within that, Carson, one of the questions that came up was, and Kara referenced it, was the, how you calculate environmental benefits. And I think there was a difference from your calculations and Travis's calculation was in the amount of kilowatt hours. I think you, as developer of the project, said it was 9,600,000. And I think Travis used the figure 6,100,000 calculation. So, do you think that that is a proper, number one, your calculation 9.6, and that's what you're saying as a developer and the operator of the project?
Yes, so that's on the addendum, restated environmental benefits.
Mhm.
And we stand behind that production figure of 9.5 million kilowatt hours per year. You know, that's a very important figure for us because our revenue is based off of that. You basically take 9.5 million times 13 cents a kilowatt hour, and that's how much revenue you get. It's definitely not 6 million kilowatt hours a year. We have software, advanced software using historical weather modeling to output how much electricity the system will generate. So given that level of energy output, those are the environmental benefits, you know, per the EPA's greenhouse gas equivalencies calculator.
So you factored in, and while you may have misstated at one time the numbers, these are the correct numbers based on EPA calculator.
Correct. And those are screenshots directly from the EPA's tool. If you were to input 9.5 million kilowatt hours per year.
Okay. All right, any other questions for Carson? Any other thing you want to cover? There's another subject that came up. And in fact, it sort of questioned our ability to do residential in terms of that. And we go back to the IDA Act. This is circulated to everyone.
Are you, Mr. Chairman, you're talking about housing in our Utah? Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah.
Okay, just clarification. I wasn't sure. The
Well, the
residential.
ability for IDAs to do residential.
That's great, that's great.
We sent that out. You can read it. Anyone, I'll have, Ally post on the website so we can look at it. We go back to different decisions made under the courts. And it starts with the IDA Act. The IDA Act says when the legislation governing the creation, organization, and power of the IDAs in New York State was enacted in 1969. It provided that its general purpose was to promote the economic welfare of the state's inhabitants and to actively promote, attract, encourage, and develop an economically sound commerce and industry through governmental action for the purpose of preventing unemployment, and economic deterioration. This intent was further evidenced by the original provision of GML Section 852, which provided that the purpose of the agency shall be to promote, develop, encourage, and assist in acquiring, construction, reconstructing, improving, maintaining, equipping, and furnishing industrial, manufacturing, warehousing, commercial, and research facilities, and thereby advance the job opportunity, general prosperity, and economic welfare of the people of the state of New York and improve their standard of living. So it goes on through here and reinforces that with several court cases that were put in place. I think that why I mention this is because in our last meeting, I think someone said the purpose of the IDA was for industrial development. It's not. It's for the economic development of the state. And I think that one of the reasons we were trying to redoing our UTEP is because there's been laws changed, there's been policies changed, and the economic purpose of the IDA changes with that. And, you know, the mentality of that, back when they started, and actually was getting on, actually when it started, it's changed, and we take companies that are manufacturing companies who are driven by electronics, by skilled manufacturing, everything else. We have economic companies here that are changed from it. That doesn't change our mission for economic development. We have to take each in the case. And, you know, we also have a mission, not only to attract and expand businesses, our mission is to help existing businesses. If we see a company that's floundering and they need help to get through 2 or 3 or 4 years, it's the IDA's mission to see what we can do to help those too. It may change pain, but I'd hate to see 85 jobs walk out the door or leave Warren County or Washington County for another location. And I'd hate to see that if there's ways we can help them keep those 85 jobs and whatever ripple effect it has on the economy here. Additionally, I think people need to understand that I will use WL Plastics, which would have been a great win, but COVID got us. They had 6 other locations they're looking at. They came here for a couple of reasons, but they had better incentives in other places. And these places are Pennsylvania, Ohio, New York. There's 2 others in New York, 1 in Connecticut. They flat said, if we don't get some assistance from the state and from the local IDA, we'll go someplace else. So part of the mission is to make sure we bring companies here. And we are an economically diverse area, and we need the jobs. We need industry coming in. We need increased assessment. As a friend of mine once said, who did a lot of economic development, 10 years flashes by in no time. So anyway. Dan.
Yeah, I just wanted to note that with regard to solar, the argument kind of against the IDA has been that if you're giving these benefits to someone who created virtually no jobs, and the sole purpose, so stated by other people, of the IDA is job creation. So
If you look through the acts, there's nowhere in the acts that says you're mandated to require jobs for economic benefit.
amen.
As a matter of fact, if we have a company that's coming in and there's a improvement they make that's going to bring you're bringing millions of dollars worth of new assessed value in. It's gonna keep the company here. And it's no job.
My
We
point
need to-
is that this is a misconception that people use and they promote, and without anything to refute that, people believe that, hey, IGA, they're not creating any jobs, we're giving these benefits. So my point is, we should somehow maybe try to educate people
Mhm.
that this is not for the purpose of the IGA.
Just one more comment on jobs. The CD's amended application, they put full-time equivalency 1.5 jobs. Not a lot of jobs, but it's not that they're not providing jobs. The bigger solar companies, the 100 megahertz, may have a lot of jobs. Because the maintenance of that big field is a lot more than,
Exactly, when people bring this up, my counter to that is just that, there are jobs. Somebody has to maintain these facilities.
Well, I go along with like a Bobby over there. And I think we should take that letter. You don't notice there's no one here from the Both Star or the Chronicle.
Mhm.
I think you and the CEO should tomorrow find a way to show them his letter and what people really think about what we should do, and that's what we're doing.
Mhm.
It's no good just talking here. We gotta get it out in the public.
so. We're at the new stage of this. I think that we need the evaluation done, information done. It may change how we end up proposing things, but we need more information.
Well, that letter should get in their hands.
Sounds like a good task force for being in communications. But on the final part for residential, if I may, that was one of the other points down that discussion that stuff with me was the checks and balance afterwards. How do we ensure they're not raising the rent 2 years after? I thought that was a valid point someone made at that meeting. So something I'll be looking for.
It's a valid point, I understand that. I hope you understand that, like, the project they came up.
Yeah.
Both Lake George Town and Village and school wanted that project. They have a big lack of what I'll call workforce housing. You know, they have a lot of condos, but they don't have places for new residents to come in. I can tell the same story about the Hudson Headwaters. Have so many jobs, they're concerned about where they house their residents and people come in and we're not ready to buy a house. Monsalt Hospital has a number of jobs that are looking for attraction. But that's the same thing. If you look at companies coming here, the first thing they look at is location. The second thing they look at is there appropriate housing for our employees. I've heard that time after time after time.
Hudson Headwaters built a house.
Yeah.
Just off Southwestern Avenue, Glen Falls.
Mhm.
Sole purpose being how interns, whatever, people could bring it on to the.
And I know that Hunt Construction will second this. The challenge is there's people willing to invest. Right now, with the cost skyrocketing, we need to help them want to invest. I can get lift, we've talked to a lot of companies who are not investing now because they're afraid to invest. They don't have the ability for the first 5 years to transition through. So, I mean, I think that's important. And you listen to Lake George, you listen to other people looking at it. When people were buying houses, all of a sudden, in the pandemic, all of a sudden, they don't have a use for it. So what are they doing? They're turning the housing into VRBOs, rentals. And, we had a conversation with the school. And one of the subjects brought up was, how can you help work with us? Because our student population, our forecasts are really impacting us. Are there ways we can work together to find ways to get more families here? Because our education forecasts are fairly, I don't want to say dismal, but fairly concerning about how do we get families here to get the kids to come to our schools. And we had Hudson Falls is, school district, a little bit of an exception. We had a meeting with them today. They don't have the same problem as other schools in Washington County or Warren County about keeping their populations up. So it can also affect the thing. And if you can paraphrase what came out of your father-in-law's letter to your customers, what was the biggest concern in 2023?
It was the cost of financing and just, in with, our new president, Amy, who took over the company in 2019. It's the same, these are national, international companies that we build on franchises, and it's all the same. The cost of financing is delaying very much so, and these are folks with deeper pockets than the people that locally here. So the impact is gonna be substantial, and the IDA should be ready to assist where it's needed, because it will be needed in the next 2 years. More so than the previous decade. Might have been the greatest decade of existence.
And it's always the same story. It's a transition for the first 5 years. You know, banks are looking for it. People don't understand, banks are sending companies to the IDA, so go get, see if you can get assistance, because we're concerned about your first 5 years. Right?
So I understand the education piece, but I don't want to go so far that we brainwash people either. We are called an industrial development agency, not the economic development corporation. We may be an economic development corporation, but you gotta remember, we are called an industrial development agency. So that's where Mr. Camarano went. We need to tell the narrative as to what we are and what we are trying to accomplish. But what we should not be doing is trying to promote a money giveaway of sales tax and mortgage tax just so that we have more business. It should be to attract a business that it's supposed to be hand in hand. That it's a big benefit for our region, or at least a little benefit for our region, not just one-sided. And right now, with some of the things that are coming here that they're trying to put on our plate, whether the state's the reason or whatever, these things they are sending are not necessarily a benefit to our region, no matter how we look at it. And I was as blind to it to begin with, but talking to our 2 assembly members and our 2 senators that we have in Washington County, some of the same people here, they are totally opposed to the abatements because there's so much money there involved that we're just giving away funding. That scares me unnecessarily. Yeah. I have no problem with the abatements to draw something in that you have to compete with that has an ongoing benefit for years to come, jobs, things like that. Makes perfect sense. I don't think they know enough about solar to know if it's a catastrophe 20 years from now instead of an absolute benefit 20 years from now.
You'll know if you can't charge your lightning.
I don't know, yes.
Can I?
Too late at that point.
Specifically address Brian's question, it was sales tax and mortgage tax that they're concerned with.
That's
It
what
was
I'm,
not the pilot.
that's what I'm concerned. The mortgage tax and sales tax.
Be specific.
No way to return it.
Can I add that with the consultant, we will demystify the profit associated with the solar project? So that will help us with our decision making.
So I think we're learning just over the past few days that community solar is much different than the big megawatt farms and some of the other farms being put in place. So, I mean, if you look at the math, according to community pilot, there's $3.7 million that's in their spreadsheet. That is what they are investing in low income or whatever they look at to give them a reduction in their income tax. I don't know if the other projects, but every project is different. Every project's financial model is different.
The talking points are the same, that we're helping all the low income and the poor when they're getting rich. And that's the.
No, Brian, not all of them say that.
No,
not all of them say that.
no, I've heard from one.
Mike?
Mr. Chairman, it's a little moving backwards a bit, back to the CE, but more likely the solar piece. I was thinking about the community benefit. And yes, there's a chance for people to buy in and get community solar. But, maybe we can ask our consultant or maybe the people at CVE, is there a way to take part of that power that's generated? If by chance there's another northeastern blackout, there's a bunch of us here are probably old enough to remember the northeastern blackout. Where nobody has power. That we could have a microgrid set up in Warren County to cover the hospital, cover this center, cover the Glens Falls, governmental centers and the like. That would be a community benefit that would be there just in case. That I would like to see if it's possible. Now, maybe all you guys don't understand, once power hits the grid, it has to have somewhere to go. There's not necessarily any storage per se. That's the problem, right?
Yeah.
But it's a matter of switching in the light, if I'm not mistaken, right? You can switch, right, and actually have percentage of it, potentially, at least in my mind, have some of that power here, locally, in case of an emergency.
May I offer maybe perhaps a question for National Grid, where it really is a distribution issue?
Storage, let me interject,
Storage.
more of a storage.
Right.
Because on a day like today, you had a blackout. You could not depend on solar, but you cannot store that energy. So now someday, maybe someone's going to invent a storage unit that can store a lot of energy in a small device. Because trust me, if you wanted to store energy now for a day or two to power at the season, you think solar arrays require a lot of land? Your battery array would require more than, but anyway, that's one of the drawbacks, because you're gonna invest in this infrastructure, this system, grid. But how dependent is it? It's not a bad idea.
I'm just curious, there might be some other creative way to get some community benefit.
Maybe we'll get an entrepreneur who'll give us an application for a storage solution.
Actually, Plug Power is doing that.
Thing goes back to you. You don't know whether this is a boom or not. But here's now, biggest problem. These solar arrays, with all those PV cells, and those have a finite life. Nobody has figured out yet what to do with them once they deplete. So we're gonna get all the solar arrays all the way. We don't do them, it'll come. And you have to take all of those PV cells and just do them anyway.
Engineers will figure it out.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken,
think you have water
the town
now.
of Kingsbury has required bonds
Yes,
to be posted.
matter of
Or
fact,
the dis-
I don't see Carson, but I believe in one of the things I read is that there is a decommissioning bond required by the community. Isn't it? Yeah, I thought so.
whether that's enough money or not.
No idea.
nobody
Well,
knows.
that's kind of no.
Right, but there is
That's what makes sense, philosophy.
All right, any other comments?
like the
All right, any of the subjects come before us? Scotty, you can, as confused as I am now? Meeting adjourned.
Thanks, Terry, that was very good.
I think that you can put that on the website and achieve all.